Today on Hebrew Grammar Help, numbers. Shalom and welcome back to Hebrew Grammar Help. I'm Sapir and today I'm going to talk about numbers. Now, I think I'm going to do numbers in two parts. Today I'm going to talk about the modern numbers that actual modern Israelis use, and a lot of these actually are also numbers that are seen in the Tanakh, but these are the numbers as we use them and write them today, not necessarily the numbers that get written with the Hebrew letters. So I'm going to talk about the numbers as they are written with the Hebrew letters in a future video, probably next week. Today I'm just going to talk about how we say the numbers and how we write them, and a couple of, all of the little nitty-gritty issues that arise with Hebrew numbers. Now, the first thing to know is that Hebrew numbers have a masculine and a feminine form, and this is the numbers between 1 and 19 have different forms for masculine and feminine, and then all of the numbers in the ones place, even further on. If there is a digit that is not 0 in the ones place, then you will be saying it either masculine or feminine, depending on what you are counting. So this all depends on what the number applies to. So hopefully you already know that basically every Hebrew noun is either masculine or feminine. So it doesn't actually matter who is talking, right? It's not, oh, I'm a woman, so I'm going to use these numbers, and a guy is going to use a different set of numbers. No, what matters is what is being counted. So if I'm talking about 5 books, the word for books is masculine, so I'm going to use a masculine number there. If I'm talking about 5 cookies, the word for cookie is feminine, and so I'm going to use the feminine number for cookies. I noticed that there are a lot of apps that don't like to talk about grammar. And I understand that kind of makes sense because students are generally very, very afraid of grammar. But the problem is that grammar is different in every language. And if you're serious about wanting to learn a foreign language, you are going to have to get used to learning a little bit about grammar, because you're not going to just magically absorb it the way kids will magically absorb language. That ability of ours to magically absorb language stops right around puberty. But apps, schools, certain programs, they know that people are afraid of grammar, and so they'll tell you no grammar. But you're never going to learn a language that way. If you do want to learn a language so that you're going to be able to speak it, you are going to have to learn a little bit about grammar. All right, so there's a couple things that are a little bit confusing to beginners when they start to learn how to use the numbers in Hebrew. The first thing is that when we count in Hebrew, we use feminine numbers. If we're just counting or doing math and we're not actually specifically counting books or cookies or something like that. If we're just saying, 5 minus 3 is 2, we're just doing basic math, we're using feminine numbers. The second part that is very confusing is that it's the masculine numbers that almost always have an a with a kamatz hey at the end. And kamatz hey very, very often denotes a feminine version of something. So when I say teacher, if it's a masculine teacher, it's more. If it's a feminine teacher, it's mora with a kamathe. If I say student, a masculine student is talmid. A feminine student is talmida with a kamathe at the end. So we get used to the fact that the kamathe at the end always means that something is feminine. But it is not, that's not true. The word Laila also has a kamathe at the end, and it is a masculine word. Ata, meaning you. Ata is the masculine form. At is the feminine form. So kamathe at the end does not always mean feminine. Now this is apparently so confusing that I've even seen an instructor at a theology school claim that you use feminine numbers for masculine words and vice versa, because he was convinced that all of the numbers with the a at the end were the feminines. Not true. If it has, if we say it starts with 3, shlosha, arba'a, chamisha. These numbers with the a at the end are always masculine. Yeah, it doesn't fit the pattern for adjectives and nouns. But guess what? Numbers aren't adjectives and nouns, so they go by their own pattern. All right, and so just remember, though, that it's also only the numbers between 1 and 19 that have a different form for masculine and feminine, and then always the ones place has a different number for masculine and feminine. All right, so let's get started. We're going to start with 0, because if we don't start with 0, I'm going to forget it. So 0 is the same. Remember I said 1 through 19, not 0. 0 is the same whether we're doing masculine or feminine, and 0 is Fs. Fs. All right? So now I'm going to go through the numbers 1 through 10 in feminine and then in masculine. So in feminine, we have achat, shtayim, shalosh, arba, chamesh, shesh, sheva, shmone, tesha, eser. Okay, those were the feminine numbers, 1 through 10. Now listen to them in masculine. Echad, shnayim, shlosha, arba'a, chamisha, shisha, shiv'a, shmona, tish'a, asara. All right, so from 3 to 10, basically the difference is an a at the end, and then there is a little bit of a vowel difference. For 1, the difference is achat with a taf at the end versus echad with a dalet at the end. For 2, the difference is in the middle of the word. Shtayim with a taf as the second letter for feminine, as opposed to shnayim with a nun as the second letter. And then all of the rest of them, it's basically just an added hey. Except for, notice that shmone, if you write it without nikud, it is hard to tell. If you just saw that word sitting there on its own, you would not know if you need to pronounce it shmone or shmona. But you would figure it out from the rest of the sentence. 2 more weird little things. The first one is the word for 1, achat or echad, always comes after the noun. So if I want to say I have one son, יש לי בן אחד. If I have one daughter, יש לי בת אחת. But if I have 3 sons, יש לי 3 בנים. And if I have 3 daughters, יש לי 3 בנות. So all of the numbers come before the noun that we're talking about, except for the number 1. The number 1 is the only one that comes after the noun. Another little weirdity is that the number 2, both in the masculine and in the feminine, gets shortened when a noun comes directly after it. So using that same pattern of sentences that I was just talking about, if I want to say I have 2 sons, I don't say יש לי 2 בנים. No, that would be a wrong sentence. The שניים gets shortened to שני. יש לי 2 בנים. I have 2 sons. And likewise with the feminine, יש לי 2 בנות. 2 בנות. So this is only when the noun actually follows the number. So if someone asks you, כמה בנות יש לך? How many daughters do you have? You can say 2, 2, or you can say 2 בנות, 2 daughters. This rule only applies to the actual number 2. If it's 22 or 102 or 1,000,002, this rule no longer applies. We're going to say 22, 102. We could say, if I have 22 cookies, יש לי 22 עוגיות. We're not going to say 22. That one we're not going to say. 22. And so that rule about shortening shtaim to shtei and shnaim to shnei only applies if it is exactly 2. 1, 2. All right, so let's move on to the teens. Remember that the teens also have a different masculine and feminine. Now, if it weren't for the fact that the number for 10 also changes, I would just say, oh, it's just the ones place. But the number for 10 also changes in the teens. So you have to pay attention to that. So basically all the teens are the ones place number plus like a kind of funky version of the number 10. And sometimes that ones place gets a little bit shortened also. All right, let's do the feminine. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay? So notice we don't say tesha esre, it's cha. So that first vowel got shortened, reduced to a schwa. So teens in the masculine, we're going to have 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and Tisha Asar. So now you know from 0 to 19. I want to talk a little bit about smichut or construct forms for the masculine numbers. Now, if you know anything about smichut or construct forms, you know that usually it involves at least 2 nouns. And it's something like the first noun always, not always, but very often gets some kind of a weird special form. And so, as I mentioned, it's almost always 2 or more nouns in a row. But the masculine numbers also have smichut forms. I've only heard it used up to the number 10. To be honest, I'm not sure if it can be used with the teens. And anything bigger than the teens, you're not gonna use a smichut form. So I'm just gonna teach you up until the number 10 because those are the only ones that I'm absolutely positive have smichut forms. This is only in masculine. The feminine forms do not change. And what this means in English is when you are specifying a specific group of something. So I can have 3 books, but I can also have the 3 books, like the specific 3 books that we've been talking about, or the 3 books that I need for a specific class, or the 3 books written by this author, or whatever. Okay? So you don't ever hear this kind of construction used with the word one. I think you would just use a different word that means like the singular book, right? I've never heard it used with one. And with 2, the number 2 just uses its form that goes right before a noun, shnei. And so there's nothing different there. So I'm gonna teach you the construction using the word 3, and so that you can see how it's used. So if I want to say the 3 books, the way I do it is I use my special smichut form of 3, which is going to be shloshet. So it's not shlosha, it's shloshet. The stress is on the O, and then it has an et at the end instead of an a. Shloshet. And then I do the he hayediah, which is the definite article. And as we should know, it is attached to the word. It's a prefix, not a separate word. He hayediah. And then the word. So shloshet hasfarim means the 3 books. So we're kind of saying it a little bit out of order from the way we would say it in English. It comes out to meaning 3 the books. That's how it's said in Hebrew. So let's get through the numbers. Let's go through that same phrase from 2 to 10. So what we have is Shnei hasfarim, Shloshet hasfarim, Arba'at hasfarim, Chameshet hasfarim, Sheshet hasfarim, Shiv'at hasfarim, Shmonat hasfarim, Tish'at hasfarim, and Aseret hasfarim. All right, so that's just one more little complication when it comes to Hebrew numbers. I said they were complicated and I wasn't lying. So that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. All right, so if you have any questions or feedback, please leave it in the comments. And as always, if you have any grammar situation that has you flummoxed, let me know in the comments and I will do my best to do a video. Hit like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want to see more. Lehitraot, Papa Ama Ba'a. See you next time.